Hey there, this is Heather with Especially Paper. Today I'm going to show you how to make a giant Gerber daisy. This one is 19 inches wide. It's a great piece to hang solo on the wall or to combine with some other flowers for a wall decoration. I've crafted it from cardstock and I've already cut the pieces with my Cricut Maker machine, but this template does include a PDF version as well if you want to hand cut the pieces. And you can get that template at especiallypaper.com. So you'll need craft glue. This is my favorite quick dry adhesive from Scotch. If you'd like to hang the piece, some paddle wire works really well. And the base piece has two holes cut into it for the wire. So just remember to put those through before you finish your piece if you'd like to hang it. I've got one large base piece cut. So this is the one that has the holes in it. And I want to show you, this has some guide marks in it. So there in the center, it's just a little tiny cut to help mark the center. And then along the edge, there are some small cuts to help guide you on where to place the petals. And at the bottom of the large petals, you'll see dots. That just indicates the size. It's just to help you keep all of your pieces organized. And these pieces are scored in the middle. There are two versions of the file for your cutting machine. There's one with a score line, which is what I use for these pieces. And then there's also one with a perforated line. So that's the small dashed cut line if you don't have a scoring tool. The first step is to fold all the petals on that center score line. I'm going to use my trusty ruler. It's just a little 6-inch ruler that I've had for ages, but any kind of straight edge that you can line up against that score line will just make it a little bit easier. These don't need to be folded completely in half. You just want to create that shape in the petal. In this example, I'm using 110-pound cardstock. I actually recommend using 65-pound cardstock. It's lighter, it's a lot easier to work with. I accidentally bought this 110-pound cardstock quite a while back thinking it was 65-pound. And this was just a good opportunity to use it up. And it works just fine too, if that's what you happen to have on hand. It's just a little bit harder to work with. It's not as easy to fold as the lighter weight cardstock. And the 65-pound cardstock, if you are in the US, I pick mine up oftentimes at Michael's if I'm looking for like a variety pack of color. I do try to get it on sale, but the Recollections brand is 65-pound cardstock most of the time. Just keep an eye on the package because sometimes they'll have special weights or special packages that is not the 65-pound. All right, so just keep going. I'm not going to show you all of this. That would certainly get a little bit boring, but I'll come back to you in a few minutes when all of these petals have been folded. Next up, we're going to create the rolled fringe center. I like to create this at the beginning of the project because it does have glue on the back of the piece. So creating it at the beginning gives that glue some time to dry. I've got 24 strips of this green fringe that will make the size center that you see in this example. If you'd like a larger center, simply roll more fringe strips. So I'm going to grab a short piece of floral wire, a toothpick also works, anything to help get this roll started. I'm just wrapping the end of the strip around the wire. If you have a quilling tool like this one, it's a really useful time to bring it out. That does make getting the roll started a lot easier, but I wanted to show an option that you don't need special tools. Just a toothpick, a wire, anything that's thin like that will work. As you roll the strip, just make sure to keep the top and bottom even. And you don't need glue along the entire strip, so just a bit of glue at the end of each strip as you roll will be enough to keep this together. Add the next strip immediately following the one before it and keep rolling until you have all 24 strips rolled together. Now that the strips are rolled together, I'm adding some color to my center. This is definitely an optional step. The green paper I used is a little bit brighter than I wanted. I wanted to tone that down just a little bit and add some variety to the center to create a little more dimension. I'm using soft pastels from Pan Pastel, just using the straight white. And I'm applying it with a cosmetic sponge, putting more color in the center of the flower. That's where I want the center to be the lightest. So I'm adding the most white there. And then kind of gradiating it out. Is that a word? Graduating it out, making it a little bit less at the edge. All right, now we're going to fan out that fringe. So use your fingers to simply spread the fringe apart, pulling from the center to the outer edge of the flower. And as you do this, you'll see that center slowly starting to take shape. Once you get it started, I like to pick up the piece and fold down the edges of the fringe. So all the way down. It's going to do a couple of things. It's going to make your center a little bit larger because those outer pieces are fanned out. And then it's also going to start to give the center a curved shape. Kind of mushroom shaped. That might be a better way to describe it. And this is a step that I tend to take too long to do, actually, because I like the feel of the paper. I think it's kind of fun. I like messing around with it. So you don't need to take forever to do this. But just keep playing with it until you're happy with the shape and the spread of that fringe. Once you're happy with the shape, spread a thin layer of glue on the back. I like to use a piece of scrap paper. Is really handy to help spread that glue and keep it to a thin layer. And set aside to dry. The next step is arranging the outer petals and adhering them to the large base. I've got all of my petals that we folded previously ready to go. We want to start with the petals that have a single dot at the base of the petal. So petal 1. Align the petal between those little tiny cut guides on the edge. And the outer edge of that base, that sort of T at the bottom of the petal, can align to the edge of the base circle. I like to add enough glue to do a few petals at a time. That makes things a little bit quicker. Because I'm using the thicker cardstock, it is taking a little bit more glue than I would need if I had a lighter cardstock. So it needs just a little bit more to keep it down against the paper. Make sure you align these petals tightly. It's a pretty tight fit as it goes around. You can also just overlap them a tiny bit once you get to the end if you find that you've run out of space. So just keep aligning those along the edge of the base, right next to each other as you go around the circle. And as a reminder, this is 15 petals for each petal size that we're doing. For the second layer of petals, you'll need the petal that has 2 dots on the base, petal number 2. And place those just inside of the largest ring of petals and position them so that they are right in the middle between two of the larger petals. Keep going around the ring until you've added 15 of petal size number 2. The final outer layer petal is petal size number 3, the smallest petals. Add those the same exact way we added the second layer, so just inside of layer 2, and position each petal so that it is right in the middle of 2 petals from the layer before. And just a reminder that if you're going to be hanging this on a wall, you want to add those wires before those holes in the center are covered up. So this is a good time before you add this layer to slide that hanging wire into the holes. And since the center is it's getting a little bit smaller now, you will need to overlap these petal pieces in order to keep them in the right position. So just arrange them so that they are right in between 2 of the petals on the layer before. Overlap as much as you need to in order to do that, and you'll be good. Just a couple more petals left to do, and we'll be finished with all of the large petals for this piece. Next, we're going to create the inner petals. So these are the kind of fluffy, smaller petals that surround the center of the flower. I'm adding color to my inner petals. This is completely optional. I'm using a lighter weight paper. So here I'm using the 65-pound cardstock. It's a little bit darker than I want it to be. So I'm adding white pan pastel, much like I did for the center. If you do decide to add color to your inner petals, make sure when you glue them that you glue them color side down. So that will become the outside of the center. And if you put it color side up, then you'll end up not seeing the work that you've put into adding the color. You'll need your small circle base for this. And in the center of this small base, there is a little teeny tiny guide cut. So that simply marks the center. I like to add glue to the entire piece so that I can do an entire set of pieces at one time. This is a pretty quick way to do it. So as you add your pieces, it works just like a pie. Put the point of the piece right on that center guide mark and then align them just like pie slices coming together. You'll need 5 pieces to create an entire circle. I'm using 2 layers of the largest inner petal and 2 layers of the second largest inner petal. If you prefer to cut fewer pieces, you could certainly cut that back to 1 layer of each of those. Likewise, for the very smallest petals, I'm only using 1 layer. If you want an even fluffier center, you could use 2 layers or even more of those small petals. Once you finish the first layer, again, I'm using 2 layers of the largest petal. So this first layer had a single dot on each piece. I'm going to put another layer of the petals with a single dot. And just like with the largest outer petals, I'm going to position the piece so that when it's set down, the petals alternate. So just position it so the petal is in the middle of the 2 petals from the first layer. So each of the layers requires 5 pieces. This is the second of layer 1. You'll need 2, layer 2. So just continue the process exactly this way, aligning each layer by starting it with the center point in the center of the piece and alternating the petals. Once you have all the layers complete, curl the petals inward. I'm using my bone folder tool. This is my favorite tool for curling paper. And you can probably curl a couple petals at a time. It just depends on how comfortable you are with it. Just simply pull the paper between your thumb and the tool. So kind of like you would curl gift ribbon. So same process. More pressure will be a tighter curl, and less pressure will give you a slighter, more gentle curl in the paper. If you don't have a bone folder tool, this can be done with lots of things that you might find around the house. So using closed scissor blades, again, very much like we used to curl gift ribbon. I use my little ruler that you saw previously. I tried that and confirmed that that worked as well. So lots of different things can be used. You don't need to go out and buy special tools. Although if you do a lot of paper crafting, I do think this bone folder is a great tool to have on hand, and they're not that expensive. We're almost done with this flower. Now we need to just assemble all the pieces that we've put together. So we have the big set of outer petals. Add a good amount of glue right in the middle and drop in your inner petals. Just make sure this is centered. And now add the very center of the flower. You just need glue around the outer edge of this, just enough to keep it in place. Once these pieces are dry, this flower will be ready to hang. When you're crafting your flower, don't be afraid to make it your own. So I've tried to make the template easy to use with guide marks and a default setup that can create a really fantastic flower, but you can also play around with the size of pieces, the number of petals, any number of variations to make this flower your own. Here's a quick snapshot of another version I created. So same exact setup for the outer petals, but I've actually scaled the inner petals down to be smaller. And I've made the center of the flower larger. So instead of using 24 strips, I used 3 pages of the strips, that's 36 in total, to create a larger center. So a little more opened up, a little more visible for that center that requires so much work. So just keep in mind, you don't have to use the template exactly as it comes. You can play around with it and make it your own. I hope you've enjoyed this project.